Thank you very much, Professor Urrows, for this very fascinating presentation. As the tradition, Jesuit tradition, tells us, there were not many Jesuits who falsified the conviction that Jesuita not cantat, the Jesuit does not sing. That is a traditional conviction that Jesuits are not very passionate about singing. But there were some who contributed, if not to the culture of singing, at least to the culture, to the musical culture in their respective time. And Professor Urrows showed us enumerating all those several Jesuits who in China particularly contributed to the musical culture, but especially in today's context, François Ravary. Professor Urrows, he focuses in his research, in his actual research, on the letters which Ravary sent to Europe, which is something that nobody explored before. And one of the difficulty is that those letters are bound in France, and he still needs to get some copies of those letters to complete his research. But basically, the outcome of this research will be a book titled Jesuita Cantat, to prove that Jesuits can sing. So we are very willing, we are waiting for your publication and the day when you can easily travel to Macau. So now I would welcome any questions from the public here, and I also encourage those who are online with us through Zoom to type their questions through chat. We have already one question.
I think there are 3 in chat right now.
Yes.
How would you like me to do this? Shall we take the questions from?
Yeah, no, let's start from I would suggest to start from the public here, from those present in Macau. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Urrows. Are there any Jesuit compositions, musical compositions, still existing in Shanghai, Jiangnan during the mid-19th century? This is what I'm interested in, any legacy of hymns, musical compositions.
Yeah, this of course is a very interesting topic. I can tell you that I have not found any of Ravary's compositions. It would be interesting to see them from the historical perspective. I'm not expecting anything earth-shattering from the music itself, should we ever find it. We do have 6, I have managed to locate 5 or 6 compositions of Basuyo, but I have not been able to find any of the pieces that he wrote while he was in China. I've only been able to find pieces that he wrote before 1865 when he was still living in France. When I was working on my history of the organ in China, I avoided the whole question of repertoire because I felt it was a bottomless pit. Now, of course, this is a more important issue. Unfortunately, I have to tell you, I haven't really found any of the music that was composed on site, whether it was composed by the Jesuits or whether it was composed by their students. I mean, we know there were pieces, but unfortunately, I have not managed to uncover any of this material yet. I simply know from Ravary's letters the names of particular compositions, mostly by Louis Lambilotte, that he performed with his choirs.
In another perspective, in which we can see the Western musicians, so-called Jesuits, coming to China, seeing efforts or having examples of interchange musical styles, which is one of the aspects of enculturation, liturgy, and so on, is how to integrate the local culture, the sub-musical culture, into, I would say, music as a reality of our lives, of our churches, of our communities. There are efforts in that line of integration, or even the effort of transforming aspects of, for instance, of church music, religious music, in the sense of using the proper Chinese instruments, the concepts of music and so on. There are any effort in that line with the Father Ravary?
Yeah, in the case of Ravary, he does not seem to have been able to appreciate Chinese music in and of itself as he found it. His training left him quite Eurocentric in that regard. What interested him were the instruments. And he, in one of his letters to Basuyo, he goes through a group of about 5 or 6 different indigenous instruments that he found, and he said, these are terrible, but these are okay. And so the shang and the ditsa and the qiao, the vertical end-blown flute, were instruments which he felt he could adapt to the music he wanted to perform. He knew that there had been experiments in adapting or composing religious music or liturgical pieces in Chinese styles, or based on certain kind of formulas and usages in Chinese. But he himself, so far as I know, was not particularly interested in that. It's too early for that to have been an issue. We have to remember he died in 1891. And the real kind of push, I think, to be concerned with a truly indigenous repertoire of music really doesn't overlap very much with Ravary's lifetime. So his main thrust was to help to make Western music Chinese, which is something which has been remarkably successful when you consider the number of famous and celebrated Chinese musicians, pianists, violinists, singers. The fact that every first, second, and third tier city in mainland China now has a civic center with a concert hall, and generally a standing orchestra that plays all year long. I see Ravary as an early pioneer in some of this, but he just was too early to be interested in delving much further into a truly intercultural kind of music in and of itself. He got as far as the instruments, but not as far as adapting Chinese music, which I don't think he ever quite understood.
Okay, thank you very much. We have now 2 questions from those who participate online through chat. Professor Urrows, you can read them, but I will read also to the public.
Yeah.
Yes. The first question is, have Ravary lived in Macau for some time? Yes, please.
As far as I know, he was never in Macau.
Okay, and the second question from Pedro Bonet is, an important question for me. It's been said that since Loyola times, music was not important company of Jesus was not such important in the company studies, at least in Spain where I live. But nevertheless, since times of Ricci and Pantoja, And later also in the missions of Paraguay, it was important. What may Professor Urrows say about this?
Yes. I think that studies have been done beginning in the 1960s that showed that after 1600, the prohibitions or kind of poor regard for music really began to disappear in the Jesuit society, and that particularly in the foreign missions, music was recognized very early on as an important tool of evangelization. And that's to say that the further you got away from Spain or from Rome, the more likely you were to find a very vigorous musical tradition being promoted. Certainly in South America, this was the case, but also in China. And all the studies from Valignano and Ricci onward have shown that the reservations about music had really melted away by the time the China mission began. And yet this aphorism, Jesuita non cantat, somehow survived well into the 20th century, and we're still trying to show that this really wasn't the case on the ground.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions?
There's another question here, wondering what other parallels were there with the music from Holy Trinity, and was there a similar trend of missionaries teaching locals music?
I have one very interesting. I'm wondering what other parallels were there with the music from Holy Trinity. Was there a similar trend of missionaries teaching local music? And if we know in what ways Ravary was involved there as well, speaking to the bigger point of cooperation between the different missionaries.
Yeah, this is not really my area of study right now. My impression is that the Anglican mission in Shanghai, at least throughout the 19th century, was very small. It was not a mission particularly in the missionary sense. It was just there to provide the priests and the clergy to minister to the British and other people in the Anglican community in Shanghai. They were not there to evangelize local people. And so their teaching of music, whatever it may have consisted in, was strictly for the propagation of the musical needs of that particular community. There was also the problem that the other Protestant missions that were active had, for some reason, a tendency to segregate the congregations between Chinese and non-Chinese much more than the Roman Catholics did. And so this almost guaranteed that the even tentative crossovers that we see in the Roman Catholic mission in Jiangnan did not really occur in the Protestant missions, at least within the 19th century. What happened in the 20th century is probably different, but again, that's kind of outside of my area right now.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we are close to almost 8 o'clock, so 5 to 8, I think it's time for conclusion. I would like to warmly thank again Professor Urrows for his wonderful presentation and for all your questions. I would like to encourage all of you, those present here, you will receive the latest issue of the Macau-Ricci Institute, the journal of the Macau-Ricci Institute, in which you will find the article of Professor Urrows, in which he discusses one particular letter of François Ravary. As a conclusion, I would like to reiterate our gratitude together with Father Stefan Rothlin, the director of Macau-Ricci Institute, who is currently in Beijing, and he could not join us because he has a very important meeting, but he himself is very passionate about music and he supports
this project very much. So he believes, we believe together that the Macau Ricci Institute highly values the ongoing cooperation with Professor Dr. David Urrows, who has achieved groundbreaking research in the area of music pedagogy of Jesuits in China. Especially the rich correspondence of the French Jesuit François Ravary reveals a most inspiring approach to the mission of the Jesuits during the 19th century through the cultivation of a broad range of instruments, including the bamboo organ, Western orchestra, and brass band. It demonstrates a largely unknown chapter of intense creative missionary activity in the field of music, in midst of many difficulties, setbacks, and internal criticism. Father Stefan Rothlin thinks that it may be now the time to continue in this tradition in China, and hopes that the Society of Jesus may, in the same creative and courageous way, open new opportunities in sharing key values through music. To be able to understand the background of both Chinese and Western music will continue to be a privileged way to reach the heart of young people in China. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor.